Welcome to Mining the Media, providing nuggets of news and cutting-edge questions and answers, minus the political blather. Here are your hosts, G.K. Allen and Dave Jeffers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Mining the Media. I'm Dave Jeffers, the co-host and producer. That's G.K. Allen, our creator, and the co-host. And we've been chatting back and forth all weekend long. And G.K. said, hey man, I got about 10 talking points that I want to throw at our audience and throw at you, me, yours truly. And just let's react. Let's react. Let's think. Remember, this is Think Radio. So we're going to think through this stuff. We're going to analyze it and see what we come up with. So GK, let me hand it off to you, buddy.
Here are some of the talking points. Okay. I say this for folks who are left of center, right of center, dead center, or off center, because really we're at a point in history right now where we have to transcend business as usual and politics as usual and media as usual. Here we go. How are things going for Afghan women and girls right now? How are things going for Cubans who are escaping the island only to be turned around by our Coast Guard because Biden won't accept them? How are things going at the southern border where we let people who have COVID into our country? We don't even bother to. How's energy independence been going? We were energy independent when that horrible orange man left office. And now we have a president who's kissing the butt of OPEC and the Saudis. Remember Keystone, Anwar, federal lands, so on and so forth. We were energy dependent. How's inflation been treating you? I know my favorite meal at my favorite takeout place is now 25% more than it was 2 weeks ago. I've been looking at crime stats across the country. Numbers at the low end are about 17%, and at the high end, about 41% for violent crime increases. Obviously, it's different from city to city. Why is Fauci still taking his word by anybody? He's contradicted himself every other day. Hunter Biden's laptop, another one has disappeared. Is he that stoned and incompetent, or does he leave him behind deliberately? There might be something to this. And finally, this one really gets to me. Pfizer, by the way, folks, is not making its employees take the vaccine. This is an amazing story to me. I only saw it in 2 or 3 places. I didn't see it in any liberal media. And I really want to suggest this as I turn on my cell phone, because Dave, I want to read something specifically from a publication in a couple of seconds, and bear with me while I'm doing this. But I really believe that it may well be time, again, whether you're left of center, right of center, dead center, or off center, we have to start talking about impeaching Joe Biden. Now, there's something I want to read here about what's going on in Afghanistan, and these words say it all. I think the words you could have written, Dave, or I could have written. Here we go. Our abandonment of the Afghans helped us, counted on us, staked their lives on us as the final gratuitous shame that we could have avoided. The Biden administration failed to heed the warnings on Afghanistan, failed to act with urgency. That failure has left tens of thousands of Afghans terrible fate. This betrayal will live in infamy. The burden of shame falls on President Joe Biden. Guess who wrote that? Guess what publication printed that day?
Oh my gosh. That's some strong words.
The Atlantic. The Atlantic is left of center, has always been left of center. This is not from Breitbart. This is not from WorldNet Daily.
Oh. This
is not from any of our guys.
Wow.
That's the Atlantic. What do you think about that, Dave?
There's only one reason they're writing that. They're ready to move on from Biden. Because
you think that's a convenient excuse? The door has now been opened?
Well, I mean, it's hard. It unfortunately, it's a reality. What they say is absolutely true. And it's a reality. It's not something they had to manufacture. But go back to Rahm Emanuel. never let a crisis go to waste. They've had to have a reason to get rid of Biden. Biden was never going to stay in office. I said summer of 2021, he was gone. And this is the summer of 2021. I've read some people say by next spring at the latest, probably by the winter, because then the midterms are ramping up. But they got to get rid of him. They have to get rid of him. The numbers. One thing that you should always understand about Democrats is they are really good at internal polling. That is why do you think the Democrats would have cheated if they knew they were going to win? The answer is no. No.
And they wouldn't fight the investigations unless they were guilty.
They wouldn't have done none of that stuff. If they knew they were going to win, and they've done this before, they knew they were going to win. They knew Obama was going to win. They didn't cheat. They didn't have to cheat. I mean, they did some, but not openly like they're doing. And that's because they're very good at internal polling. So their internal polls are telling them they are in massive trouble in the midterms, and to the point they're going to lose both houses, and maybe badly. So they've had to have a reason to get rid of Biden. They'll stick with Harris, but they've got to take the attention away, and they're going to blame the Republican. They're going to do everything. It's going to be the bad.
Biden is still blaming Trump for this Afghanistan.
Of course, but I think that this is a sign that his days are numbered. Look how long it took for the Cuomo thing to come out. Now, if they wanted Cuomo to stay in the office, do you think that we would have ever heard from a U.S. attorney in that investigation that they just did on Cuomo? Do you think that ever would have come out?
No, because the polling indicated they were in trouble, and they realized the bigger iceberg was the death of grandma and grandpa, not pension.
Yeah, well, that's part of the things. That's part of the problem. But they decided we don't want Cuomo no more. And again, the reality, they do have to react to the realities. They can only hide so much. We always say that the progressive Marxist media is the public relations firm for the Democrat Party.
They're the Goebbels.
This is the first shot. And here's the thing. That is a brilliantly written piece. It's dead on accurate. And maybe some of them really do believe that. Now, I want to piggyback on what you said, because when I woke up from my nap, I was looking at some stuff, and I like to read Instagram and Twitter.
You're big on power naps, aren't you?
Yes, I have to have them. But I read this, and this was on Dinesh D'Souza's page. This was said 3 weeks ago on July 21st, 2021. The Afghan security forces have the capacity to sufficiently fight and defend their country. This was said 3 weeks ago. This was not said by the State Department. This was not said by the Biden administration. This was not said by the Secretary of Defense. This was said by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The head 4-star general of our military said that. President Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. In fact, my pastor and I, we went to dinner with our wives Friday night, and we were talking about this. And he brought up a great point. He said, how did these guys roll in there so quick? Why would they do that? They had to have been given the green light somehow. I mean, if my pastor's very, very well-versed man, but he's not a military man. And he said, how did they roll over half that country in such a short time? They had to know there was going to be no resistance.
Well, and the Afghan army is a joke.
Of course. But they knew that, and here we have the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, Dinesh put it best, talking about these generals. He said, these people will say anything, all capital letters, anything, to protect their careers, pensions, and subsequent lucrative deals with defense contractors.
I find it amazing that so many of the most accurate commentators, when it comes to our domestic politics and geopolitics, are people who are not originally from this country.
Yeah.
As in Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah.
And you may remember, because I know we talked about it on an earlier broadcast of ours, when I interviewed him when I was doing a radio show up in the Panhandle, up in the Destin, Walton area. And he was on the show. And he basically said one of the beautiful things about America is in India, if you raise enough money just to get a little fruit stand or vegetable stand or something, and it doesn't work out, you're never going to get the money again. He said in America, you can reinvent yourself and try and
Right.
get that third, fourth, fifth attempt and eventually succeed. And the danger I think we have right now in our country is we've got people, and I don't understand this, and I don't understand why more people who are old-fashioned Reagan Democrats really think it's time for them to speak up. And I want to return to something I said a few shows ago. I'm not saying it because I want to say it or I vote for the guy. I'm looking at it as an observer, as dispassionately as possible. I think the Democrats are going to be in such disarray. I think we're going to see everybody forming their own, what they used to call, to be very politically incorrect, Polish firing squad. And I think we're going to see a lot of liberals and ultra liberals and progressives shooting each other, so to speak. I don't mean literally, I mean verbally, so forth, the way we deal with things. I think that Joe Manchin is going to try to present himself as a reasonable Democrat who can get a nomination, run in a couple of primaries. He runs in Iowa and New Hampshire. He's going to get a lot of votes. And I think Joe Manchin is positioning himself to be the reasonable candidate as opposed to the treasonable candidate.
That's very clever the way you put that. But
just came up with it. It's brilliant.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing with him. I agree he could win Iowa, but Iowa's more liberal than you may realize in the Democrat Party. They are very liberal. That's why Obama won. That was the first upset by Obama. That was Hillary's. Hillary's was considered right of center of Obama.
And keep in mind, though, in Iowa, if you finish a strong second, or in New Hampshire, a strong second is a victory.
Yeah, it is. But Obama won Iowa.
Yeah, I know.
I could see Manchin maybe coming in second in Iowa. That's possible. Depends on who he's running against, first of all. Definitely could see him win New Hampshire. Could see him win South Carolina. That could give him some momentum. His problem is going to be winning California, Colorado, New York.
Might not be difficult in California if Newsom's out of the picture. Cuomo already is out of the picture, and the lieutenant governor of New York is conservative by New York State Democrat.
Right. I mean, it makes sense. Here's where he's going to the problem for the Democrat Party is all their money comes from Marxists, all the big money, Soros, all these people. I mean, I'm with Mark Levin. We're not going to call them progressives anymore. They're Marxists. They're American Marxists. They have and even Dinesh D'Souza wrote a book about, yes, very good book, American Marxism by Mark Levin. Y'all should get a copy because it tells the story. And Dinesh wrote a book earlier about something of the same, where he described how Americans have taken their brand of Marxism. Because see, they always keep trying. They say, we just have never done it right. Yeah. No, you've just never done it. You've just never done it the way they do it because you can't here. So you think you just have to reinvent it, but it doesn't matter. Everybody sees it. I don't know if there's enough of those blue blood Democrats, Southern Democrats, Reagan Democrat. I don't know if there's enough of them anymore. I think they all left the party. I think they're Republicans now. I just don't think there's enough anymore.
We're living in a different age, but I do believe, I could be wrong, and this is probably just cockeyed optimism on my part, but I'm speaking with my grandson. He's a college student. The sleeping giant or the iceberg ahead politically, a lot of kids in college who are keeping it quiet right now, holding their cards close to their vest. They're not progressive. They're not Marxists. They're on to what many of these professors are doing.
Right.
So I think to a great extent, that old adage about it's the economy stupid, and you add in the fact that we're letting in so many people who have COVID through our southern border. I think it's reprehensible that we're turning Cubans back to Cuba who are escaping communism If the Democrats think they're going to win the state of Florida, good luck. And Afghanistan, beyond an embarrassment. I think it's Saigon on steroids. I think it's even worse.
Yeah, it is. I know that what people are seeing is making them change their mind. But one of our former guests, and he's going to come back on the show, I've been talking with him, Brian Ward, he does a lot of political consulting, and he's trying to teach Republicans how to market themselves, how to talk to people, how to not bore them with 19-page white papers, how to brief them onto why something's. We suck at that. We are horrible at that on our side.
Take off your tie and put on a t-shirt.
Yes. Or maybe just a polo shirt, loosen up. And so Brian's been going around the country, not physically, but contacting different campaigns and congressmen and helping them to learn how to talk to these kids, because you're right. This generation coming up is way smarter than we are. Our kids, my kids are in their 30s. They're very conservative. They're mostly, you would they're like Gen Zers, but they're more like rush babies. Okay. If you wanted to categorize a group of conservatives in the 30-something category they don't look at us like we're totally crazy, but they know we are a little bit.
Eccentric sounds better.
Yeah, but they're rush babies. So that group of kids that, in that age group, and probably somewhat your daughter in her age group, they grew up rush babies. They got that brand of conservatism and traditional values and everything. If you're going to put them in a media block, I
understand what you said. My daughter got it from me,
right?
And in turn married someone who's a very smart gentleman and conservative. And our kids, my 3 grandkids, are all, well, the littlest one might not be political yet, but the 2 older ones are. And right. I think it's safe to say none of them would vote Democrat.
Well, but this group coming up, and it's going to include my grandson. He's only 12. He's already questioning everything. Yeah.
That's when I became political, when I was 12.
And not questioning to where he's bucking authority. He has questions, and he's very inquisitive about life as a Christian. He's a young Christian boy. He's in the teen group. He's learning about a biblical worldview, but this group of kids, with particularly your oldest grandson's age, you can't just throw these little rush-isms that we throw. You have got to talk to them and explain to them the benefit of something, because they're very smart. They're very analytical, which is kind of funny though, because when you think about it, and maybe it's because they know they've been lied to, or they critically think more than they realize, I think, and that's one of the things, folks, that we're trying to do here is let's connect. We don't have to reject everything from the past because everything's new. We can take what we do and what we grew up with and what we knew and plug it in. See, the thing is, I think we make the mistake, and we do this with politics, we do this with Christianity, we do this in marketing. We try to make something good relevant. You don't have to make it relevant. It's relevant. The Word of God is relative or relevant. The American founding is relevant still to this day. Where we fail at it, and what people like Brian Ward are trying to do, is to make it relative. How do we relate it to the times now? That's where the challenge is. When somebody cracks that code with this new 20-something generation coming up, these millennials, and I know millennials get a bad rap, but there's some your group of kids, the millennials that are now in college, that I see going off to college now from our church, they're very smart. They're very, very They know how to think. So
And you want to know something? I know I'm only talking about my own family, but all three of the kids, especially the older kids, because they're considerably older than the youngest, there's a tremendous amount empathy, and they have a certain emotional maturity, and they're very kind. I don't mean wishy-washy. That's not what I mean. Very kind.
Yeah.
And they're bright.
Yeah.
And both the oldest granddaughter and my one and only grandson are very versatile in their interests.
And I think that's a great point, because where I'm seeing a lot of things, particularly in the evangelical community, is my group of my generation, it appears to some in the church as heartless. And this is why wokeism is so prevalent in our culture and in the churches, is we seem heartless. There's ways to address issues with some empathy, but with a stern, firm handle on teaching law and order, and how to overcome mistakes. And you can't, we're so extreme. And I think that's what you were talking about in a previous episode, is that we talk at each other all the time instead of talking to each other. And we need to at least listen to somebody and say,
well, that's part of the problem with the cancel culture.
Yeah.
Is they don't, the funny thing is, if you could get somebody from the cancel culture one-on-one, just having lunch with each other. I'm not talking about cameras and not recording, I'm not recording it, nothing like that. If you had a decent conversation with each other over a decent meal, you might actually find some common ground.
Yeah, of course. Of course you do.
It would be nice if we do. I would like this. Look, it's real simple. And bear with me on this. This is something I believe in, as you know, Dave, with my sordid past, so much of it being in the rock and roll world and entertainment. And bear with me, because I think I'm right about this. Almost anything in culture and the art, if they are to succeed, when we have the golden age, like the jazz age was in this country for pop music, the big band era, the original rock and roll era of the mid-50s, the album rock era, the British invasion, Axel, Motown, all that. Art works best when it has a degree of friction, when it has to go friction, when it has friction. Something needs to create friction, create the art. If you go back to the English invasion of the mid-60s, with all those great bands, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Who, Pink Floyd, you name it. A lot of these people came from the lower end or middle class of England. And England, for a long, long time, and still until this day, certainly has a degree of the old school time. And my point is that they had an economic problems, a lot of them. It sounds crazy, but bear with me. One of the reasons Sgt. Pepper was such a good album is because it wasn't easy to create.
Mm-hmm.
There was friction there because the equipment was not equal to what they were hearing in their heads. And because of the genius of George Martin, to put together an album that took time to create, today they could do Sgt. Pepper in under 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, that's
no friction in recording anymore.
No, and that's a great point. I remember when you had me and I watched it, and then I watched it with my wife, who's a big Beatles fan. That PBS special that they did.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
It was so well done. And I think the common ground when you want to talk to somebody on an even kill is find out what their passion is. Because everybody's passionate about something. Everybody has spiritual beliefs.
At some level, you're right. It might be hard to define, but everybody's got some way of describing it.
Yeah, everybody has a spiritual belief of some sort. Find out what that is, and then find out, help them. I was telling my Sunday school class this morning, you have to talk to people, and when they come up with something so off the wall, the cancel culture, the woke culture, the snowflakes, I mean, it's so easy to just reject them outright. And that's if I don't have my buffers on and my governors on and my mufflers on, that's my automatic response, reject, reject, and reject. It's just automatic. I don't even, and part of that's the old first sergeant in me, because I could do that with a soldier. A soldier come up to me with something just and I would just smoke him right there where he was standing. It got to the point, Greg, I don't know, our listeners aren't going to be able to see this, but if you're watching this, I would literally just do this. All I had to do was look to the ground. And if it was just my eyes, I could look my eyes to the ground, and my soldiers knew that they were to get down and do push-ups.
You know what you just did? It relates to my musical background. There was the very famous, very, very famous Benny Goodman stare.
Yeah.
And people were in his bands, and they got the same facial expression you just used on your soldiers. Benny Goodman would do it at the piano player.
Well,
and they knew what it meant.
That's fine in the military when you have soldiers who know you and you know them, but it's not a good go-to automatic response. So what I was telling them this morning, ask them questions. Why do you believe that? Where did you learn that from? These are in order. You ask these questions in order, and you listen. You listen. You don't correct. You can ask maybe for some clarification, but you don't correct them. You don't steer them. You listen.
Explain yourself.
Yeah. Why do you believe that? Where did you learn that? What was the source of what you were being taught? And usually those three questions will get you so far down the road that you can actually talk to somebody. And even to the point where, you know what, if you were wrong, would you want to know? And if they say no, guess what? Okay. But you know what most of them do? When you say okay, and if they say no, you know what most of them do? I've had this happen. They'll say, well, aren't you going to tell me? Well, I thought you didn't want to know. Well, I guess I do want to know. And then you can show them, hey, well, there's this book. There's this teaching. There's this stuff that you can look at, read, or watch. And I think it'll help you understand this issue a little better. Instead of sitting there telling them, and then get into the Republican time mode where I start quoting this 19-page white paper. No, take them to something that can interest them enough. This is what's so brilliant about Answers in Genesis. If you have questions about Christianity and about creation and evolution and all that, go to aig.org. Stands for Answers in Genesis. The most brilliant website. And they have videos. They have little vignettes. It's not like you're going to seminary or you're getting a PhD in, nuclear physics or whatever. It's very approachable and teachable, and it's brilliant. And we need to, and this is what Brian's trying to do with his I call it a ministry. He uses.
You're talking about Brian Ward.
Brian Ward. He uses it as it is his profession, but I think it's more of a ministry. He teaches people how to talk to people. We just don't know how to talk to each other anymore. We don't know how to critically. All this is by design. We talk at each other, and we don't talk to each other. We don't try to understand each other,
and we don't listen.
I've had people. Let me give you one more incident, and I'll hand it back. It's been 6 years this month. 6 years. I went to my 40th high school reunion, and everybody knew who I was. Most people knew because I published a lot of books. I got a social media following. People know that I'm a very devout Christian, very conservative in my views. In fact, I got the eyeballs from some people who didn't like it. And I even had a couple ladies come up and say, you know what? I don't agree with most of what you say, but I appreciate the way you approach it. Anyway, we're standing around, group of us from high school, and we were all very close school. My wife and my best friend's wife, who was a year behind us, they marveled at how close we are to this day, 40 years ago. Anyway, we're in a group of about 6 people. And I did not bring it up, but somehow we got onto talks about politics, and then we got onto the subject of abortion. And we were going around, and I was just telling them why it was wrong. that it wasn't healthcare, that it wasn't a woman's choice, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. And by the time we're done, of course, I'm the radical. And you know what I said to everybody? I said, isn't it funny that I'm the radical and I'm the only one trying to save the baby? Now, you know why I knew that worked? Because before we had this conversation, we were all talking about our grandchildren and our children.
We're not aborted. That's why they're here.
None of them had an abortion.
Well, look, I said with the pro and con of this particular issue, which is certainly the third rail issue, probably the most serious issue, I think, decade after decade, say for the last 30 or 40 years in this country, certainly the decision of the Supreme Court, what was it, 73 or so.
Yes.
And this is one of those issues where I think the best way, if you're in front of a group of people that are pro-choice, ask a very simple question. How many people in this room wish their mother had aborted them?
I quoted you in my very first book. This is one fetus who's glad his mom didn't abort him.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have missed falling in love. I would have missed being a father and a grandfather. I would have missed being a drummer. I would have missed interviewing some amazing musicians and politicians and authors.
Right.
I would have missed a lot of things. I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah.
I understand someone who may have been raped or is the victim of incest. I can understand that being a problem for them, no doubt about it. And someone once said, some liberal once said something I thought was sort of accurate about too many conservatives, is they believe that that conservatives believe in life in the womb, but they don't pay much attention to the child once the child's out of the womb. And I think sometimes that's true because I believe our side of the aisle. And at one time in my life, I was pro-choice. I'm not going to lie. Many, many years ago,
I was too.
I was in a situation. I was, shall we say, liberal for part of my youth. I was conservative, raised on Goldwater, so on and so forth. But for a while, I went into the typical collegiate liberal thing, and then I got out of it again.
Yeah.
Right. And I happen to believe that as it relates to abortion, as it relates to any of the third rail issues, the most important thing we can do, whatever your belief is understand why the other person thinks the way they do, and then remind yourself of our own downside, and bear with me. Because I do believe, I know I'm speaking right now with a very broad brush, and there's lots of exceptions. But I do believe that conservatives who are pro-life have not always been so good at being pro. And I think
what? You dropped
adoption.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to go to Russia or China to adopt a child. If we were able to adopt children because we're not aborted in this country, we could adopt Americans, if you will, and save them from being aborted by adopting them. I think we should have done more on that.
That's the government's fault. That's the government's fault. That's not conservatives' fault. That's the government's fault.
No, what I'm saying is conservatives have not done a good job of talking about it much or writing about it.
Right. Well, now
it's something we should have put a spotlight on more.
It's become, in the last 15, 20 years, a big thing. And that's one of the things that we very much push.
Well, the thing is with abortion, I'm glad that the brief period of time where I thought it was okay and it was a woman's choice, I really do believe, and I'm glad that I changed my position on that.
Sure.
It's one of those things where if I look at it now and I look back and I wonder why I even thought it made sense way back then. Life is very, very precious.
Because you're talking about life, and it's the number one issue. And I can prove it. It's in our founding document. We are endowed with inalienable rights. Among them, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson did not write that because it flowed nice from the pen. If you're dead, you don't care about being free, and you dang sure can't pursue happiness. If you're alive, but in jail or under oppression, you can't pursue happiness. You can only pursue happiness when you're free and you're alive. Life is the number one issue. Go back and read John Locke. Go back and read Blackstone. It always comes back to the right to be alive. This is what self-defense is all about. People ask me, you're pro-life and you're pro-guns. Explain that. I'm like, that's easy. You just explained it. They're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, yeah, you did. I'm pro-guns because I'm pro-life. And they're like, I'm not following you. I love my life and the life of my family so much that if you try to take either of them, I'm going to meet you with my gun. I'm going to defend them from you. It makes perfect sense. The reason we have the right to, we don't just have the right to self-defense. We have the duty of self-defense, that we are to defend. Life is precious. When Cain killed his brother, God said that the ground cried out in Genesis. Life is precious. Blood is precious. And when we spill blood, this is why our country is cursed right now. We have murdered over 50 million babies.
As it relates to that, the group that has the highest abortion rate are Black people.
Right.
And I wish Black Lives Mattered to Black Lives Mattered, because the abortion mills in Philadelphia and elsewhere are killing a lot of what would have been future students, baseball players, philosophers, who knows?
I need to get Alveda. I'm going to see if I can't get Alveda King to come on our show. She's the niece of Martin Luther King.
I've interviewed her on my old show.
She's an amazing woman.
Yeah.
And she's very active. Maybe, I know she's very, very busy woman, but I'm going to see if we can get her back or get her on the show, because that's her heart. She says, we're doing this to our own community. Great point, GK. Well, we've been going for a while, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. And
I do want to wrap it up with this, okay? Because we're recording this on the day that the Taliban wins, okay? I'm really concerned, and I do think it's time, and forget if Kamala becomes president, there's other ways of dealing with that. The fact is, I believe Joe Biden should be impeached.
I don't think it's going to come to that. I think he's going to get 25th Amendment. I think that's a simpler process.
Oh, you're probably right. That would be better for the nation.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I really do believe he should be out of office. And please understand, I do not mean anything of violence whatsoever. No way. Thank you very, very much. Violence is not the answer. And part of the problem with violence over the ages, sometimes it turns people who aren't so good into martyrs.
But I do agree with you. I mean, there's many of an impeachable offense that he's done. I think he has broken his oath to office.
Yeah, for a secure nation. A president's about securing the nation.
Absolutely. But I think that he's going to get 25th Amendment. I think they're going to do that on him, or he's just going to resign for health issues. He knows his time's up. I think it's time up.
He's in Camp David right now, probably having ice cream.
Well,
and a few days ago, Barack Obama, the ultimate narcissist, celebrating himself, a spreader event. Because I guarantee you, if Donald Trump Jr. or Donald Trump had that kind of party, it would be a spreader event.
Of course.
And I'm tired of the hypocrisy. And look, our guys are hypocrites too. I am not a fan, nor are you, of the Republican Party. And I've said a million different times, painting with a broad brush at the national federal level, give the Republicans a D-, Democrats an F. That does not make the Republicans honor roll students.
No. All right, folks. Well, hey, our next show, we're going to have somebody you've probably never heard of. His name's Dr. Frank Ferretti. He is a sociologist in England, and he talks about how society has evolved to what it's evolved now, and how we look at liberty and think it's not a great thing. So we're going to bring him on. He's amazing, so kind and generous to say, yes, of course, I'd love to come on your show. And we went back and forth, but we've set up a time. We're going to meet with him on Friday, and we'll get that out right after it's done. We set it up to where, because he's in England, so he's going to meet with us 5 o'clock London time, and I know you miss London a lot, but
Oh, look, Dave, you've heard me say it, and people who know me personally. On 2 occasions in my life, I worked in England professionally. Once a drummer in a band in the mid '70s, and then in the mid '80s, I managed a band out of New Brighton, England, which is right across the Mersey River from Liverpool. And way before that day, my dad used to do a lot of business in Europe, and he would take me and my mom on his business trips. And from 1959 Dave to 1973, I was almost in England almost all of those years, 59 to 73.
beautiful.
And I figured out in my lifetime, combining all my visits and stays over there, that I spent about 22 months of my life in the UK, often in small towns, not always in London. It's the only country in the world where I feel every bit as home in England as I do in America.
Yeah, I'm that way with Germany.
Yeah, and I love the British. They still create the best musicians in rock and roll, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of great American bands and solo artists, but I still think the British have it over us with bands. I think we have it over them with solo artists. But by and large, they invented the English language. They still have the best actors. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
They do American accents better than we do British accents.
that's true.
And if there's any place more beautiful than Cornwall, Devon, the Lake District, parts of Lincolnshire, if there's any place prettier than that, the Cotswolds, I'd like to know. I know I sound perhaps a little unreasonable about this, but I love my country very, very much. To me, it's the gold medalist nation. But honestly, England is the silver medalist.
Yeah,
I love England. God bless the British, because they saved the world in 1939 and 40.
yeah.
An awful lot of our side telling England to pull its own chestnuts out of the fire. Roosevelt actually had a better read. He was one of the few liberals who had a better read on an upcoming storm than many of the conservatives of his day, Charles Lindbergh and others. However, you don't have Roosevelt in the White House right now. And what Joe Biden has done in Afghanistan is something truly, truly evil, stupid, and I am so embarrassed for my country. Shame on this administration for allowing this to happen. And I hope when I read that article from The Atlantic, we need more of it. Whatever the motivation, we need more of it.
All right, we ended on that note, folks. Remember, go to our website, mindingthemedia.com. You can subscribe there. We are now on iHeartRadio. That's the latest. We came up on their platform this past week, so we're up on iHeartRadio. You can, at our website, you can subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher,
Rumble, YouTube.
and YouTube. So go to visit our website, and we have opened up a page, Media Minds, and I'm thinking more, but we may add one more page to where we can put little posts, maybe synopsis of the show where we say, hey, I'll link this, I'll link that. I need to do that on a separate page so I don't clog up the front page too much. So I think we'll do that too. Yeah, it looks like GK's ride has come. So, hey, folks, we'll see you later. Until next time, be good and stay tuned. Thanks.